is a quote, a lot of people had access to that Tesla. That's from somebody connected to all of this. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But if they did,
well, that would definitely complicate
him, and that they included the missing persons flyer. She's a missing person. She's, 12 or 13 at that time. And the next, I think it was the next day or the day after, she showed up. She just showed up on her own back home.
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
When they gonna let a nigga stay out this long and they got a little bit of evidence? They didn't arrest nigga with way less evidence. If nothing else, put him in jail just to put a hole.
They found her in the trunk of a Tesla, dismembered, decomposed, and left to rot on a quiet Los Angeles street. 14-year-old Celeste Revas Hernandez had been missing for weeks, but what shocked investigators wasn't just the brutality of her death. It was whose car she was found in. That Tesla was registered to rising pop artist David, a name once celebrated by Interscope Records and managed by Josh Marshall, a man who's now at the center of a federal investigation. What began as whispers on Reddit has exploded into a full-blown scandal of exploitation, cover-ups, and damning digital receipts that no one can ignore anymore. And as the story unfolds, it's becoming painfully clear this wasn't just negligence. It might have been a setup from the start. They found a car on a quiet street in Los Angeles. A silver Tesla, parked for weeks, reeking of something so foul that tow yard employees thought it was a dead animal. But when police opened the trunk, what they found would haunt the city for months. Inside was the body of 14-year-old Celeste Revas Hernandez, wrapped in a black trash bag, her limbs dismembered, her small wrist still wearing a bracelet engraved with a single letter, M. The scene was so gruesome, investigators reportedly had to step away to compose themselves. But the true shock came minutes later when they ran the plates. The Tesla was registered to 26-year-old recording artist David, a rising star once signed under Interscope Records and managed by industry insider Josh Marshall, two names that had already been whispered about in connection to Celeste long before her body was ever found. That's when the internet erupted. How does a teenage girl end up dead in the trunk of a luxury car belonging to a major label artist? And why were the same people who were supposed to protect her, the adults with power, money, and influence, now scrambling to deny even knowing her? As the investigation deepened, one truth began to cut through the noise. This wasn't random, and it wasn't new. Celeste had been reported missing 3 times in the same year. There were warnings, emails, red flags everyone ignored. And at the center of it all stood David, and the man who managed his every move, Josh Marshall, both of whom are now under the microscope of a federal investigation that threatens to destroy everything they built. Long before the Tesla was ever towed, the internet had already seen the warning signs, and they were hiding in plain sight. On TikTok, under one of David's own music videos, a chilling comment from February 2024 went viral. It read, "Waiting for LAPD to get your ass for messing with a 13-year-old girl." At the time, fans brushed it off as trolling or some twisted inside joke. But after Celeste's body was discovered months later, that single comment took on a new meaning. It wasn't just speculation. It was a warning, one that thousands had scrolled past without realizing how real it was. On Reddit, threads began to resurface. Entire discussions dedicated to David's suspicious relationship with a runaway teen who was often seen in the background of his live streams. Users shared screenshots, tagged his management, even claimed to have emailed the label directly. But every post that gained traction mysteriously disappeared within hours. Moderators locked the threads. Screenshots vanished. And that's when people noticed something deeply unsettling. The only listed moderator of David's official subreddit was David himself, meaning he wasn't just watching the conversation, he was the one deleting it. Over on TikTok, creators began connecting dots in real time, re-uploading the deleted Reddit posts and dissecting David's lyrics that suddenly felt darker than before. One video racked up over 2 million views overnight after pointing out how a scene in David's One More Dance music video eerily mirrored the crime. A man dragging a body across the floor, shoving it into the trunk of a car. Back when it first dropped, fans thought it was edgy art. Now, it felt like a confession caught on film. Even before the news broke, whispers had already spread through fan pages and Discord servers. People talked about a missing girl named Celeste who was allegedly staying with David and his manager, Josh Marshall. A few users claimed to have seen her in the background of his Instagram lives. Some said they recognized her school uniform. But whenever anyone tried to raise alarms, their comments were mass reported and accounts started getting shadow banned. It was as if someone wanted the internet to forget before it ever remembered. By the time police confirmed Celeste's identity, the online sleuths had already built the timeline themselves. Screenshots, DMs, and timestamps that showed how long the red flags had been waving. And in one haunting twist, users realized the date on that viral TikTok comment. February 2024, lined up almost perfectly with the first time Celeste had been reported missing. It wasn't random noise. It was a digital breadcrumb trail, one that led straight to the people now claiming they had no idea who she was. Celeste Revas Hernandez wasn't just another missing teen lost in the noise of social media. She was a child who kept trying to escape, and every time she did, the adults who should have protected her looked the other way. In the span of just 3 months, Celeste had been reported missing 3 separate times by her mother to the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. She was only 14, barely out of middle school, and already caught in a cycle of running, returning, and disappearing again. Her friends said she didn't have an easy home life, arguments, instability, and a desperate need to feel seen. But instead of finding safety, she found herself drawn into the orbit of people who saw her as disposable. And that's where Josh Marshall comes in, not just as David's manager, but as the man who, according to evidence, knew exactly who Celeste was and how young she really was. Back in February 2024, a family friend of Celeste sent Josh an email that couldn't have been more direct. Attached was her official missing persons report, complete with her age, photo, and case number. The subject line read, "We know Celeste is living with you and David. She needs to come home." 1 day later, Celeste returned home, proof that Josh saw the message, read it, and understood what it meant. He knew she was a missing minor. He knew she'd been staying with his client. And still, weeks later, she was back living under the same roof. The timeline is irrefutable. The emails were forwarded to investigators. The digital trail confirmed. This wasn't rumor. It was documented negligence. A grown man, managing a major label artist, aware that a teenage girl was being harbored, and he chose silence over responsibility. Instead of alerting police, instead of creating distance, Josh stayed quiet. And that silence, people say, may have cost Celeste her life. When the internet started connecting dots, Josh Marshall did what every guilty man with something to hide does. He posted a statement. A long, polished message that tried to sound calm and rational, but read more like a PR script than the truth. In it, Josh denied ever receiving any emails about Celeste. He insisted he had no knowledge of her situation, claiming he never lived with David and barely interacted with him because he worked remotely 95% of the time. He emphasized being a father of 3 and said the story was affecting his family. On the surface, it was classic damage control. Humanize yourself, deflect blame, and sound like the victim. But here's the problem. The receipts don't lie. The email existed, time-stamped and verified. It wasn't some anonymous claim. It came directly from a family friend, complete with attachments that forced Celeste to return home once before. So when Josh claimed ignorance, it wasn't just misleading, it was impossible. And the contradictions didn't stop there. In one line, he said he had no direct involvement with David. In another, he described himself as David's manager. So which was it? Even his phrasing raised eyebrows. He said, "I live full-time with my wife and kids," as if distance could erase digital proof. He repeated, "I received no emails," multiple times, almost like he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Online, fans tore his statement apart line by line, comparing his denials to the timeline of Celeste's disappearances, and nothing matched. The dates, the contact, the sightings, all pointed straight back to him. Josh wanted the public to believe this was a tragedy that blindsided everyone. But the truth? He'd been warned. In writing. With evidence. And instead of taking action, he buried it. That's not miscommunication. That's moral failure dressed up as PR. It was a hot afternoon when detectives finally cracked open the Tesla's trunk. The metallic smell hit them first, sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Then, beneath a layer of black trash bags and duct tape, they found her. Celeste, 14 years old. Her wrists were bound, her small hands still wearing chipped pink nail polish. But what froze investigators wasn't the horror of what they were seeing. It was the tiny bracelet still clasped around her wrist. Silver, scratched, and cheap. Engraved with a single letter, M. That M wasn't random. It matched the pendant worn by David in nearly every Instagram post that year. A symbol fans once believed stood for manifest. Now it stood for murder. The Tesla itself was parked just 5 miles from David's home, in a quiet residential neighborhood in Echo Park. Neighbors said the car had been sitting there for nearly 3 weeks, windows fogged from the inside. When authorities traced the plates, it led back to David's LLC, a shell company tied to both his music business and Josh Marshall's management firm. The most chilling discovery came days later, when a Tesla keycard was found halfway between the abandoned car and David's gated property, lying in the gutter like someone had dropped it while running. Forensic teams confirmed fingerprints on the interior matched both David and Celeste. Her DNA was found on the passenger seat, the door handle, and the inside of the trunk. It painted a devastating picture. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was deliberate. The car had been wiped, cleaned, and parked to disappear. But whoever did it missed one thing, the bracelet, that small, unassuming piece of jewelry that tied the entire story together. Once the police report leaked, the internet did what it always does. It turned into a crime lab. Fans became detectives overnight, piecing together every post, lyric, and live stream. TikTok threads exploded with eerie parallels between David's songs and Celeste's case. One lyric in particular, "She sleeps in my car. No one knows where we are," spread like wildfire as creators slowed the audio and synced it with screenshots of him driving the same silver Tesla seen in the investigation photos. Reddit lit up next. Users began compiling what they called the evidence timeline. Timestamps, archived tweets, flight logs, deleted photos. Someone even uncovered footage from a private Discord chat where David bragged about not being able to take her home yet. Whether it was Celeste or not, the implication was clear: he was hiding someone. But the moment that sent chills through the fandom came when David himself logged into his official subreddit. Thousands of people were online, posting evidence, theories, and messages demanding answers. And suddenly, everything disappeared. Threads were locked, posts deleted, users banned in real time. Within minutes, the page went dark. Screenshots later confirmed the moderator account performing the deletions was none other than you/David Official. He was silencing the investigation as it unfolded, live. That only made it worse. The deletions became proof. Fans began screen recording everything, reposting it on TikTok, creating backup threads, and Google Drives filled with digital evidence. The more David tried to erase, the more the internet dug deeper. And by then, the question wasn't whether he was guilty. It was how long he'd been hiding it. As outrage reached a fever pitch, all eyes turned to the label, Interscope Records. The same company that built David's image, marketed his dark romantic persona, and protected his every move. But when reporters asked for comment, Interscope said nothing. No press release, no suspension, no public statement of concern for Celeste or her family. Just silence. That silence hit differently for those who knew the label's history. This wasn't the first time a teenage girl had fallen through the cracks under Interscope's watch. Years ago, another rising artist, Cassie Ventura, had been a teenager in the same system, allegedly groomed and controlled by powerful men while the label looked away. The pattern was hauntingly familiar. Young talent, industry protection, and silence when things turned dark. People started calling it the Interscope pipeline, a machine that profited off youth, beauty, and vulnerability, then buried the consequences when the headlines got too close. For Celeste, there was no PR team, no spin, no voice left to tell her story. The company that helped launch David's career refused to even say her name. And in that silence, the message was loud and clear. The music industry didn't just fail Celeste, it erased her. The internet lost its mind. Within hours of the Tesla photos leaking, social media exploded into a full-blown frenzy. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Celeste and hashtag Tesla Girl began trending worldwide. TikTok became a war zone of theories, voiceovers, and digital forensics. Creators stitched every clip of David they could find, his live streams, lyrics, even blurry screenshots of his DMs, connecting dots in real time. It felt like watching the internet build its own criminal case before the police could even catch up. Twitter, now X, turned into a battleground. Fans demanded arrests, tagging the LAPD in every post. Others swore they recognized Celeste's voice in background audio from David's old Twitch streams. One viral post read, "If TikTok can solve murders faster than the cops, what does that say about who's protecting who?" And under it, 1,000 replies echoed the same word, Interscope. Then came the influencers. Podcasters, YouTubers, and online commentators picked it up like wildfire. Charleston White went live on Instagram, his voice shaking with rage, saying, "You can't hide behind no record label when a baby done died." That man knew. That manager knew. Y'all can't delete the truth. Clips of his rant hit every platform, turning outrage into movement. Even mainstream outlets had to catch up to the chaos. CNN, The Shade Room, and TMZ all ran with the story after it hit 10 million views in less than a day. But while the public demanded answers, something else was happening quietly in the background. Federal agencies had stepped in. According to early reports, the LAPD's investigation had triggered a joint task force with the FBI's Human Trafficking Division, focusing not just on David, but on Josh Marshall and the money trail connecting his management firm to a wider web of talent shelters across California. What started as an internet rumor had now turned into a federal case. And this time, no one could delete it. By sunrise 3 days later, the story took its darkest turn yet. Josh Marshall was arrested outside his home in Burbank, barefoot, disheveled, and silent. Federal agents raided both his residence and David's studio within hours. The warrant listed obstruction of justice, harboring a minor, and destruction of evidence. Inside the seized Tesla, investigators reportedly recovered surveillance footage from the vehicle's onboard cameras, fragments of encrypted data showing movement near the trunk around the night Celeste disappeared. Experts say the footage is being reconstructed frame by frame, and what it could reveal might be devastating. There were also recovered texts between Josh and David, messages suggesting panic after the girl ran, and discussions about needing to move the car. As the evidence piles up, one truth has become undeniable. Celeste's death didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the end result of negligence, power, and silence. People saw, people warned, and those with the power to stop it didn't. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered holding signs that read, "Say her name, Celeste Revas Hernandez." Her story has become a symbol of what happens when fame blinds justice, and when the industry protects its own until the truth forces its way out. And as the investigation widens, whispers suggest more arrests could be coming. More names, more cover-ups, more victims. For now, all that remains is a silver Tesla, an engraved bracelet, and a haunting question that echoes across the internet. How many more Celestes have to die before someone listens?